How do you pronounce your name?
Elise By Olsen.
B. Olsen. Okay, not by.
No.
Okay.
It's not my brand's name. A lot of people think it's my brand's name, that it's like a mark by Marc Jacobs
Okay.
kind of thing. But it's not. It's my mom's surname.
Okay. So, wait, because I have a wallet here, which is disturbing, and then I have another wallet. Talk me about that.
So, Wallet is my second publication project, and it started out of a need. I mean, while I was doing Recens Paper, which is a youth culture magazine, for 5-6 years, I also stopped. I turned 18. I decided to step down and resign because I was becoming an adult.
So you also resigned from yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the new thing to do.
Okay.
What can I say? So I stopped that. We can get back to that later, I think, about the resignation part. But I was in the industry. I was running a magazine, print magazine, for 5 years. And there was a lot of things that I was disagreeing with and that I was intimidated by. So when I was thinking about, okay, what is the next publication project going to be, it had to be something where there was space for me to express my criticism and to express what I was kind of disagreeing with. So that's why I wanted to do Wallet. I mean, we didn't know the name then, but if we wanted to do something that was text-based, that was there was room for in-depth journalism. I think there's been a good 10 years now where publishing and journalism has been very visually focused, and where visuals have trumped text content, and I kind of wanted to redeem that. I kind of wanted to redeem the journalistic landscape of the fashion industry and the text climate a little bit.
Who's the reader of Wallet?
I don't know. I don't want to be too specific about the demographic, but I think it's both the readers that kind of started with Recens and have followed me on my Recens journey until Wallet. So it's also like a younger readership, but it's definitely also people in the industry and people that are interested in the fashion industry, and not necessarily the clothes, but more about the business, the politics, the money, the ethics, the power in this big industry.
Does print still make sense?
I mean, I think it does. If you make it make sense. I think it's, for my generation, it's a luxury product, and I grew up on digital. I grew up like this. I'm born with the internet being as natural as my right hand. So I think the print, a print object and a tangibility is something very luxurious for us.
So you are an editor-in-chief, but maybe you also define yourself curator. I read it somewhere. What is the meaning of being a curator today?
I don't know. I think in a way it's a term that's kind of overly used, but in another way, I also think it's a perfect word to describe what's going on right now. We're curating personas online. We're kind of creating these personas and marketing them, and creating this persona. But it's also, I mean, in my sense, I also curate exhibitions, not in fashion, but more in the art kind of realm. But I also think a lot of what I do in Wallet is about curating and putting together visual content and kind of merging it together and making it a strong structure to kind of work within and create this framework. And I think maybe that's what...
So when you say personas, you mean brand identities?
Kind of, yeah, but more personal. We're creating a brand around ourselves in many ways, and I think that, for me, that happened really early. I started blogging when I was 8 years old, and I kind of grew up with that. I learned how to write on my blog. I didn't know how to, I barely knew how to read. But I got this blog, and which was a very normal thing to do for people in my generation, believe it or not. I think we grew up, this was before Instagram, so we had blogs and we created these little like micro media platforms. When I was blogging about what I had in my lunchbox, it was not like any interesting content at all, but it was just about getting it out there. It was very like a basic way of creating your own little universe at 8 years old. So I think that's what I mean by this persona. It's about the universe, it's about what you publish on Instagram or wherever.
Before, you used the word criticism. So basically, what do you criticize?
I think in Wallet, what's really important is that it's not a one-way criticism. It's not me telling you what to do differently. It's more an open conversation. It's more about asking new questions to these people that are in powerful positions and kind of reflecting around it and creating new consciousness in a way.
What should brand do differently today?
Customization and looking at the individual brand is going to kind of give you the answer for that. It's not every single brand needs to do Fashion Week. Not every single brand needs to do an alternative, fashion installation. I think it totally depends on the brand ethos and the scale of the brand and what you're trying to do with your brand. But I don't know. I think it's more engaging in the conversation, and also I think it's really interesting when a brand, merges a lot of different fields, not just fashion, but that, working a bit more multidisciplinary and looking into other cultural industries like music and art and literature. And
culture is another key word. I have the feeling that major brands, at least those with a minimum value to be considered, are switching to cultural management as a new form of brand management. It's more about telling a story, not storytelling, telling a story which has something behind, solid and related to the brand in a wider way, and also to the society. It's kind of finding a different tuning than before, which was more about intrinsic quality, price, exposure. And now it's a bit more about debate, tuning with the society and with the changing values of the society.
Yeah.
So the question is how the values of the society are changing today.
I think, as you say, everything is becoming very fluid. I think that's a big thing that we're seeing, both in terms of values, in terms of different stereotypes, different standards, in terms of beauty, in terms of gender, in terms of politics, in terms of how we travel, how we live. Everything is becoming very fluid. So I think that's a key word.
What do you mean with fluid?
That everything is very multidisciplinary. It's not just one thing. I'm not just an editor. I'm also a curator. I'm a writer. I'm a entrepreneur, businesswoman. Yeah, I don't know. I think everything is, people don't identify with just one thing now. It's not just one lifeline that you need to follow. It's kind of, you can go back to school when you're 40, 50, change work. And I also think in the fashion industry, just in terms of the organization and in terms of work, we also see that a lot of people are becoming or choosing to work in a freelance way, which I also think is very fluid. We don't want to be bound to one office desk in one certain city. We want to have that freedom, move around. So maybe freedom, but also, fluidity.
So you talked about school, and before we said, okay, what a brand should do today, and then what a school should do today.
I think what you do here is really great. I think it's more about expanding the notion of education. I think education is also becoming very fluid, and the fact that you have these talks programs and that you have all these different initiatives and activations that go beyond the curriculum, I think it's great. I think that's what we need to see more of. There's one thing about education that I think is standard for whatever school you go to. Actually, two things. One thing is sometimes it doesn't matter what school you go to, it's more about what you make out of it. I think that's one thing. And I think another thing is, I think it's about having the time to kind of reflect and study in whatever format you do it, whether you do it yourself, whether you do it in the school context or the school structure. I think it gives you time to kind of work on yourself and study, and in whatever way you do that, and just research and become really conscious. I think that's what's really great about education.
Consciousness is another key word. Sometimes we use the word sustainability for everything, for environment, for mental health, for everything. Maybe consciousness is a new way to, or a wider or more complete way to talk about sustainability, because sustainability comes from our brain before,
Yeah.
Pollution is in our brain before being in the environment. So consciousness about what?
Well, I think consciousness is great because it kind of has more to do with action. Sustainability, okay, that's not sustainable or that is sustainable. I think it's more about if you get more conscious and I get more conscious about these different problematics, then we can solve issues. But conscious about a lot of things. I think what we do in Wallet is try to create new consciousness around whatever field, publishing, education, retail, casting, production, whatever it might be. Different fields around fashion. And in the fashion industry, we all have to be really conscious because it's a big industry, there's a lot of responsibility. So I think we all have to be really conscious.
Responsibility is another key word, but we don't go through now. Because actually the title of this guest lecture was about Generation Z or Z, like Jay-Z. Depending. Yeah. Who are these guys? Z generation.
Well, in many ways, I think it's become a way of defining a generation that doesn't want to be defined in a way. I don't know, it's become more of like a marketing kind of word for me, or more like, I'm invited to talk about Gen Z, or I'm invited to consult a brand about Gen Z, or I'm invited to consult a museum on how to get Gen Z to come to your museum. So it's more about trying to define this generation that nobody can wrap their head around. I don't know. I think I'm Gen Z. I don't know what defines age-wise Gen Z, but it's...
Well, I think first element to define the Gen Z is to be digital native. So the fact that you didn't see the world without cell phones and without the internet, which brings you as a generation not to use these toys as a tool, but a kind of environment where to stay in.
Like I said, when I was 8 years old, an environment, creating my own universe. I grew up in the suburb of Oslo, Norway, which is really tiny. There was a few people at my school. I didn't really get along with everyone. So I wanted to create this own universe myself.
To create your own universe. Isn't that also a way to isolate yourself sometimes?
To isolate myself?
Yeah.
Well, I think on the internet, and also another thing that's a key word of my generation is community, and that's also something that a brand can do better today. It's all about community feel. We want to feel part of something, whether that is, subculture or it's mainstream culture, whatever it is, or a sports team or organization, I don't know, politics. But I think online I found this core of people on Instagram eventually, on Facebook, on social media, on the internet. I used to, when I was in middle school, I used to Skype with people, with like internet friends from London in my lunch break, because I was, yeah, I was isolating myself from
In my
that in a way.
history studies at the university, I studied that wars in the 20th century served to nations to unify themselves, because going to work together was a way to, know each other, people from the south, people from the north, and so on. It sounds so old. And today we can consider the fact that this cell phone with the internet is basically unifying a new generation of people all around the world. So it's not about nations anymore, it's the entire world.
Yeah.
Good. So when these people are unified around common values, we say one of the values is certain kind of freedom, equality. Sometimes we define it inclusivity or diversity. How would you define this area of values?
I said a few of them. I think fluidity, I think community feel, working really multidisciplinary, not wanting to be defined. We had a fun keyword, three fun keywords in Recens that was borderless, ageless, and genderless, which I think kind of summarizes a lot of values for this new generation and for the world now. Everything is so global. We want to be part of, or it's accessible for us to be part of a global movement now, or a global community.
That's so interesting because the whole marketing theories are based on segmentations, which is exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
Like dividing people in segments
Yeah.
while you are talking about unifying people. So how marketing can be in the next future if this is the new generation?
When you asked about who's the wallet reader, demographics are becoming just as fluid, because when I was young, I like to read the newspaper, or I like to read literature that was not for children, that was for grown-ups or for older kids. So I think these are all individual things, but I don't know. I think Gucci is doing it in a really good way, and that's not because I work with them or anything, but I think they're doing it in quite a good way, because they have their casting is very inclusive and it's very fluid, and of course they have completely normal economic institutional behavior as a big fashion house, but I think their marketing is stepping away from this segmentation, I think.
So yeah, you entered a new topic directly, which is consumption, which is a very bad word because consumption means reducing something to death, basically, consuming like a candle. So how are the Gen Z consuming today?
Well, that's what we talk a lot about in this fifth issue of Wallet, which is about retail. So I
This is
did,
Wallet.
yeah. So I did 3 interviews. One with Rami Atala from SSENSE, who's the co-founder of SSENSE, the CEO of Grailed, which is a consignment app, and Vittorio Radice from La Rinascente, which is a department store. So 3 very different people. SSENSE is a e-commerce, but they also have a small concept store that's kind of redoing the way of doing retail and consuming today. But I think what really struck me is that the secondary market of fashion is so much bigger than we think, and it's kind of, I think it's a bit underrated. There's so much, not just with Grailed, but with all these different archives or eBay or Facebook groups where you resell groups. I think that the secondary market of fashion is really interesting because You talk about it in the art market, you talk about the auctions, you talk about selling works for a higher price and whatever. In fashion, it hasn't been so much talked about, there hasn't been so much consciousness around that, but I think that's a really interesting place to kind of go into, and also something that we see statistically young people are really into, because there's such big inventory. Raf Simons now sells way worse than his stuff from the 90s. So people want stuff that's, I don't know if it has to do with that it's more rare or that it has more like affection value. I don't really know what does it, but it's a very positive development, I think.
Yeah, I thought about that many times. Sometimes I also arrived to the conclusion that it might be a way to buy pieces of history that you didn't live.
Yeah.
Very simply.
Yeah. And that hasn't been digitalized.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly. So is it more about the product or more about the experience there?
Totally the experience. I think any sort of Gen Z consultant would tell you that, if that's what you were asking. But I think everything today is about, and that's also why print is doing really well, or why a physical retail store that's done well can be really amazing, because it has the tangible experience, it has the sensible experience. You can find yourself in this space, you can smell a certain thing, you can look at a certain thing, you can feel a certain thing. So I think that's also why the rise of the concept store is interesting in that sense, because the concept store offers so much more than the product. They have an exhibition, they have a curated playlist, they have special kind of people working there or nobody working there. So I think the concept store is kind of
playlist.
Yeah.
I think this is so representative of the way of being of this generation. I would say of every generation.
Yeah.
So in my generation, the playlist was divided by genre and by subcultures. So all the punk records were there, the rap records were there. You know, you have your shell in your house with all vinyls, maximum CDs and cassettes. We also had cassettes, very old. Now, at that time we went crazy because we couldn't make any compilation of ours, and also because maybe a record was printed with a different sound of another record. So if you used to put them together, you had a different volume coming from the source and so on. So this used to drive us crazy, but at the same time we had the experience of opening a vinyl the same way I opened wallet before, like this way, and then you open this way, you know, it was a ritual and so on. Now you have instruments like Spotify, for example. Do you use Spotify?
I use Apple Music.
Apple Music, or there are others, and well, I have the feeling sometimes that at this point you have all the things we missed before. So the possibility to be portable, mobile, to be to make your own compilations, to have access to tons and tons of different tracks. But then I also have the feeling that there is no more experience. You don't open the vinyl this way, and I also have the feeling that even though you have different genre, when you put them together, the sound is the same, which is filtered through the processors of these instruments. Like, you know, they equalize the sound in a way that it sounds the same.
Yeah.
Also, I have the feeling that artists play today in a way to fit in these instruments. Also, the equalization of the sound is always medium because your instruments are small, so the sound has to come out from a small instrument, you know, so they all sound the same. Whatever is the genre, the sound is the same. How can you live with that? For me, it's so strange.
It's interesting what you're saying in terms of vinyls and cassettes and that this physical experience, but you also probably had, well, I don't know because I'm not of your generation, but it was probably like
My daughter, maybe.
yeah, but it was probably amazing to go to clubs or festivals and see physical experiences
Yes.
like that, and like that kind of mixing and whatever. I don't know. I think I don't know how it was before, so I can't really tell you. I grew up with either what's it called, Windows Media Player or a Walkman with a CD. So I always had this like this portable music thing.
So this was your first instrument.
I guess.
Yeah.
I guess.
Clubs. How were clubs? I mean, there are some people of my age, very few. I'm the oldest, I think. Okay. But clubs were real clubs, meaning that you cannot get in. You get beaten, basically, if you try. And the music was very mono-selected. In clubs, in the beginning, you couldn't hear, listen, and dance, whatever, mixed together. You just had a very, very, vertical selection, deep. So you have one genre, and then the sub genre of the genre, and in that club you had only that. Okay, so going to a club at that time was belonging to a place.
Yeah.
And that
It's the
place,
community feel
Yes.
that we would otherwise have maybe now on our phones.
Yeah, but now, how does it work now? I mean, on what do you build the community?
I don't know. I think it's a lot about. I mean, I also think this is important to say because I'm under the impression that clubs then and clubs now have always kind of created also a lot of fashion subcultures and a lot of fashion statements, and club culture and fashion culture has always been very merged. I'm under the impression. I don't know. I think it's a lot about those values that we talked about earlier and building something around that, but also that it's other people and your universe and your internet friends or physical friends are very accessible. And
At that time, we used to have a main culture, what we used to call the mainstream, which was the enemy,
yeah.
and many countercultures,
Yeah.
which were enemy of the main culture and to each other.
Yeah.
So it was a continuous war,
Yeah.
basically. But as you said, this clash, continuous clash, used to create also fashion. So from these subcultures, we used to have also fashion movements. Vivienne Westwood is the example, the
Yeah.
major
Yeah.
example. Well, the question is how people create now. I mean, what is the cultural source of creation?
Maybe we can talk about, I mean, before creation, we have inspiration. I don't know, I think it comes from everywhere, and something that I'm a little bit worried about, not to be too cynical, but we're being so stimulated. I'm really scared that we're going to be a generation that's just so overstimulated, and we see everything, and we're kind of just fed up with all of these things that we're seeing and listening to, and people that we talk to on a daily basis. We're being exposed to what? 4,000 or 5,000 visuals every single day online, and that's only online. I'm really scared that our generation is going to
In
be...
my life, this was in one life.
Yeah.
At my age, when I was your age, this
Yeah.
was happening in an entire life,
Yeah.
not in one day.
And now you're being dragged into
Yeah,
it. Now you
survived.
see 4,000 or
Yeah.
5,000 visuals every single day too. No, but I think that's also why I believe that print is kind of important, not to be too advertising for my own projects, but I think print is really important in terms of that, because it's something about just sitting down and paying your attention to one thing and just focusing on this thing that you're reading and sitting down for a little while and spending some time with the product. We don't do that otherwise. Always this, we see so many headlines, so many visuals, advertising, everything online. So it's something really like important about that, taking that time to kind of maybe that's what Virgil should do, you know, now that he's been traveling two cities a day for, I don't know, two years, and now that he can't go out of his house for 3 months, maybe he needs to read books and
So we
magazines.
call next magazine would be called Wait a Minute.
I mean, we're gonna do. Now this is we're on the 6th issue, which is launching in October, which is gonna be about casting. But we're going to do an issue about time and production. But I think time is a better kind of theme for production, and because there's so many things that we produce that's not just the actual garments in fashion. It's also content, it's also campaigns, it's advertising, it's everything.
This is another topic that we used to discuss since ever, I think. The relationship between content and media, and how much the content and the media are making the people be what they are.
Yeah.
So are the media really changing people and the way they are? Because, for example, you said before, you scroll continuously this way or that way. It's a cross. And this is making people used to evaluate pictures very, very fast, which means on one side shallow, but on the other hand it's also deeper.
Yeah.
Because you learn to go to the point of a picture immediately, in a few seconds, in a split second sometimes. So if a picture is good, it's really good.
Yeah.
So it's a mix of the opposites. It's very technological, but it's also more primitive.
Yeah.
Okay, so is this way to watch and to check and to read the news changing the way people are, or people are always the same and just do another instrument that is different?
Well, I still hope and think that media has definitional power left. I don't think that media is going to be irrelevant, but I also think that media right now, and has been for a while, they've been in this shift between what you say, content and influence and relevancy, and there's all of these different things. So media also needs a solid turnaround, and I mean, it's already started. So much more coming. Think about every single monthly magazine out there, commercial monthly magazine out there. What's going to happen to them? There's a lot of them. And now, last week, Marie Claire decided to decease print after 75 years or something.
So they are becoming kind of books. They are not read by people with the same frequency they had before, and because people read online.
Yeah.
So if they have to make the effort to buy a magazine, that magazine must be more deep.
Yeah, and I also think
in the research of the content.
Yeah,
maybe.
And also just customized to this new reader behavior. That's also what we tried to examine with the format of Wallet, that it's so small and it's like accessible, it's mobile, you can bring it around, it's part of your essential. It's almost, I mean, it's a little bit bigger than an iPhone, so you should be able to take it around. But I also think, again, about media and content, I think one thing is that's interesting right now is that, where brands before needed to produce one campaign a month or one campaign every second month, now it's 6 campaigns a month, 8 campaigns a month, which is great for the people, like me who work in content and work in media, and there's a lot of jobs for these kind of kids, but it also is, I think patience is like something we need to look into again, revisit. Virgil Abloh, revisit patience. Just take some time off and do something right. Like, what happened to doing stuff right and putting it out when it's ready?
Will Monsieur Arnaud be patient with him? We don't know what's going to happen there.
We don't know.
We posed you so many questions. And I think when you will go out there, you will be followed. And
amazing.
Yeah.
Nice.
But But do you have a question for us? I mean, for them?
Come to me after and we can talk.
Okay.
And I'll ask my questions.
More private. Thank you.
Thank you.